decode what's going on in your own inner world that's keeping you from living the life you're created to live. And what I think the greatest gift you can give a person is to help them step into their own life. Because I think most of us are afraid to step into our own lives. And so we live a life of obligation. We live a life of expectation. We live a life of fear. And we get only to near life experiences, and I think it's a tragedy because life is so short. And I mean, I'm 65 now, and I can't believe that I'm at this stage of life. And frankly, I don't have any friends who are 65 because they're too old. Mm. They just don't have enough vibrancy and dynamic and fearlessness. But I also have a lot of people I know who are in their 20s and they don't have a lot of life in them, and a lot of fearlessness and courage and boldness. And I just think it's a tragedy when you're living your life to be safe, right? Because every day you live to be safe, you're losing that day from living the life you're created to live.
Welcome, my guest, Erwin Raphael McManus. He is a mind, life, and cultural architect, an award-winning author and artist. His books have sold over 1 million copies and have been translated into more than a dozen languages. As a world-renowned communicator, McManus has spent the last 30 years advising and coaching CEOs, professional athletes, celebrities, billion-dollar companies, universities, and world leaders, and is passionate about helping people destroy their internal limitations and locking their personal genius. Now he releases his newest book, Mind Shift. It doesn't take a genius to think like one. Also, McManus is recognized internationally for being the founder and lead pastor of Mosaic, a spiritual movement that has inspired millions worldwide. All right, well, welcome to the show, Erwin McManus. I am so freaking honored. You have no idea. As I was kind of mentioning to you, I have known of you for so long, and I just respect your words and your wisdom, and you've really touched my heart. And of course, you've touched millions of other hearts. And this is just such an honor to share the space with you so we could impact even more lives through this message, and also revealing your new book, Mind Shift. It doesn't take a genius to think like one. I just completed this book, and it's just absolutely remarkable. So thank you, Erwin, for being on the show. I appreciate you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Erica, for having me. We don't live that far apart, and it's amazing how small the world can be. We can travel right by each other, but actually never meet.
I know.
But it's so good to meet you now.
Yeah, it's so ironic. And I've had some of your dear friends on my podcast as well, such as John Gordon and David Nurse and, a few others. And I just love, it's just so great to connect with like-minded people that are spreading the word of good wisdom and making impact. And that's very much what you do. And a lot of people I know probably are familiar with you as being the lead pastor and the founder of Mosaic Church in Hollywood, which, as I was speaking about, I've been to a few times, and I've watched your work, and your words have truly transcended so many people's lives, and it's impacted the ones that even have not found yet faith in their lives. And then it's, of course, impacted the Christians that listen to your messages. But the fact is, you speak to so many people that are able to receive your message and take it how they could take it into their own lives and how they could transform it and use it for good in their lives and other people's lives. But a lot of the work as well that you've done has actually been behind the scenes, which you have coached high-level elite entrepreneurs. You have been a speaker on speaking to millions of lives about optimal performance and transformation, as well as leading masterminds. So a lot of people don't know of that work. And I think your new book, Mind Shift, is very much going deeper into that work of really what comes down to maximizing your human performance is the mindset. And so your book, Mind Shift, it's such a powerful read, because that's really what it is how our mind really is leading our life. So anyways, if you could kind of share, first I want to know about you as far as your faith, if we could, start there. As far as you becoming a man of faith, I know that hasn't always been your journey. So I'd love to know, how did you come to discover God, and how has that transformed your life, and when did that really happen for you?
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where once you step into something, you look back and you can see fingerprints or footprints all around you. It's sort of like the moment you buy a black Tesla, you think you have the only car, but the moment you buy the black Tesla, you see black Teslas everywhere. You're completely unaware of something, and until you have it, then you're aware of it all the time. And I think that's the way I was in terms of God. I grew up essentially irreligious. I'm from El Salvador, a small country in Central America. My grandfather was an atheist who taught me reincarnation. And so ironically, even though he was an atheist, he did believe in reincarnation. And my grandmother was Roman Catholic, but she was irreligious, and so we never went to mass or anything like that. So there was no transference of tradition or ritual or anything like that. My mom, who had to leave me with my grandparents when I was born, brought me back into her life, and she was incredibly open and curious, and always searching, but didn't have any kind of established faith. And so I remember when she brought a Buddha home, and we were Buddhists for a while, and I remember when she was reading a Jewish rabbi and decided that we were Jewish, and she just was always searching for. I think she was just always searching for help. Mm. We had the Buddha in our house because maybe Buddha would bring us good luck, and Judaism for her was maybe her way of trying to make sense of why bad things happen to good people in her mind, so there was that dynamic of almost like superstition, where something out there is either making life go really bad or maybe could make life go really well, but there wasn't anything substantial. So I read every mythology book in the library by the time I was in 6th grade, and was very much on just a personal search for meaning in life. I became a philosopher and studied philosophy in college, really just trying to search for meaning in life. I was just trying to make sense of my own existence and to see if there's anything that's real. I would have never considered myself a religious person. I didn't even know that was a language. To be, frank, like I remember when my mom was 40 years old, she called me up and said that she had become a Christian. I had no idea what that was, but I wasn't against it. It was, for me, it was like she signed up for the Peace Corps, or and she sounded happy, and I was for her happiness. And she'd had a really painful life. She'd been through a few divorces. She had gone through a lot of tragedy in her life. And so for me, I was just for her happiness. So I didn't have a negative reaction at all. My brother was an atheist by that time, and he's a little bit older than me. And so his was a different impact, where now she's a person who believes in God, and she's a person who believes in Jesus, and she's identifying herself as a Christian, which was a new bit of language for us. And my brother's an atheist, and we would go home for spring break from college or go home for the summer, and he'd be reading a Bible, and I'd find that to be really weird. And I would tell him, "You're an atheist. You're being a hypocrite by reading the Bible." And he was going to church, which I would not go. And I asked him, "Why do you go to church?" And he said, "There's beautiful girls and great volleyball." And so I thought, well, I could use a little religion. It couldn't kill me. And so I didn't think of church as something where you went to find God. It was, church was a place where you had to meet girls, because you're in college, and you go to the nightclub to meet girls, or you go to the student union to meet girls, and you go to this church to meet girls. And so there wasn't anything like deeply meaningful at first. But I thought I'd considered Christianity in a philosophy class. We looked at the Old Testament for about 15 minutes, 30 minutes. we all laughed and said, how can this possibly be the God of love? And so I discounted anything from the Bible and anything connected to Jesus very quickly. But, during that time, my brother was like reading the Bible. I had two sisters. They had these faith encounters where now they believed in Jesus. And then all of a sudden, my brother was an atheist. He starts, I think, falling. I tell him, you're about to crumble under the weight of this belief system. And so I didn't see it as a positive thing. I felt like somehow they were like brainwashing my family. It made me very nervous, you know, and my family actually thought that my brother would be the hardest one to bring the faith and I would be the easiest one. And because he was an atheist and he had more of a hardened texture to him. Mm-hmm. And I was always very mystical. I always believed in spiritual things. And I believed in like human virtues, like integrity and kindness and peace and justice. And so they saw me as a person, I think, that was closer to what Jesus taught, but it didn't make me closer to Jesus. And it just made me, I wanted to be a noble human being. And that was like my aspiration before I ever believed in God. And I just couldn't figure out how to fix me. My inner world was really broken. I was in a psychiatric chair by the time I was 10 years old. I was in and out of a hospital for months. I was always on the brink of either a neurotic or psychotic break in my life. Had some deep trauma that had scarred me and marked me. But I carried it all very quietly. I was not a person you'd ever see with rage or any external expression of bitterness or anything like that. I just carried everything deeply inside me. And then my brother becomes a follower of Jesus, and I think this is really weird. And I told him he was a hypocrite. He crumbled under the weight of religion. I was brutal. And then they, the Christians talk a lot about heaven, and they think that everybody does, but everyone doesn't. And so all of a sudden I got my two sisters, my mom and my brother, all telling me they're going to heaven, but I'm going to hell.
Right.
I said, who gave you the list? And frankly, it was a little confusing to me because if I could just be objective, I was a much better human being. And I remember telling my brother, if God lets you into heaven, he has no standards.
That's funny. Oh my goodness.
Because I didn't understand anything about grace or forgiveness in that sense, or I didn't understand, who Jesus was or why he came. I still had this view that either there's nothing that's real, or if religion is accurate, we have to earn our right to be accepted and loved. We got to be good enough. We have to work for it. And maybe if we work hard enough, we'll find some kind of acceptance in eternity. But the idea that what really was compelling to me, that really drew me to Jesus, was I looked at every philosophy and every world religion I could get my hands on, and I realized everything is about what we have to do to get to something or somewhere or someone. And so this is like the image of God just being on top of this mountain and sitting there very self-righteously, very piously, and watching us kill ourselves, climbing the mountain, trying to get to him. And if we do enough good things, and if we work hard enough, and if we're noble enough or moral enough, then we can get up high enough in the mountain, get to God. I just thought that was a really corrupt, malevolent view of God, because if that's who God is, I didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Right.
If God was eluding me and making it impossible for me to get to him, and then somehow having this like sick pleasure in my painful effort, I was going to tap out. And then when I heard, no, it's the opposite, that with Jesus, it's not what you need to do to get to God. It's what God did to get to you. And all of a sudden, my whole view of God shifted from this, deity who's on top of a mountain looking down at us, seeing us trying to get to him, to this God who came down to our level, got in the mud and pulled us out of a sewer and didn't care about the stench that I carried on myself and got on him and pulled me out of my own brokenness. Then it made sense to me. I said, if there's a God who actually came to me and actually sacrificed himself so that I could have freedom and forgiveness and meaning, then I'm in. And even then, I didn't know if it was true. I didn't know if it was right. I just had the sense of, if anything is true, I hope this is true. Mm. And if there's any possibility it's true, I'm willing to give it a chance, because it's the most beautiful possibility that I'd ever heard. And so I made a irrational decision to ask God to change my life. Wow. And to ask Jesus to prove himself to me, that he was real. And I never turned back.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. I think that has been a lot of people's story in their discovery and their curiosity and giving it a chance. Like, maybe this doesn't seem true, or maybe it seems so outrageous, but just like stepping through the door and letting you be shown that this is possible, and making that commitment and welcoming God in your life. It's such a beautiful thing. I became a Christian, I believe, at age 14. And luckily it was because who I surrounded myself with, because I grew up not really having religion. Speaking of the same, like, I had a father was Jewish, my mother was Catholic, but we didn't practice anything. And my sister was an atheist. And then I discovered it through, having a boyfriend that had a family that was Christian. But I actually recently got baptized, but I've been following the path of being a Christian for a long time, but, slowly uncovering what does that mean, and going to church and surviving through, putting my faith into something bigger than myself. So one thing I know about your church, specifically Mosaic, what you've created is very different than what many people would say your average church, Christian church. And I know you have touched people in a way that, again, don't have faith in their life, or are trying to discover what their faith is. What do you think has been your deliverance that has really impacted people? Because I know you are a master at communication. That's one of the things that you teach in particular. But what do you think made all the difference in Mosaic, in your personal opinion?
I actually think probably what made the biggest difference is who we actually care about. You're really shaped by the people you care about most. And without any like judgment or anything like that, I think most churches care deeply about Christians. And it makes perfect sense. I'm not even saying that that's not right. I'm just saying that that's just what's real. And since they care deeply about Christians, and they care deeply about Christians having an extensive knowledge of the Bible, I would say that would be, and to be moral people, sin lasts no more, and so those are things you really care about. That shapes what a church looks like. And, the people I really loved and cared about were my friends who were atheists and agnostics and Buddhists and Shinto. And, I cared deeply about Japanese culture, and I cared about, I don't know why, but I had always a love for like Paris and Tokyo, and cared deeply about the relationship of creativity and beauty and art to spirituality. And so what really shaped Mosaic was we just wanted to be honest and authentic and true to people who didn't know if this was real. And so if you go to like, most really great churches, they have a language that they use, and everyone knows the language. Everyone feels really comfortable. Like, it's just nice to be the home team. People, I recently went to a Rams game against the 49ers. It was really weird because 80%, I think, of the arena were 49er fans. And so here we are at a home game, but it felt like an away game. All the fans are cheering for the other team. And I think that's the way it feels like sometimes when you go to Mosaic, if you're a Christian. And so I understand why people feel like, well, maybe this isn't a church, or maybe I don't belong here. It's because Mosaic is kind of always an away game. And Mosaic is full of people who don't believe in God. Mosaic is full of people who are searching. Mosaic is full of people who are not even sure if it's real. And so I don't allow any language that is exclusive, that makes a person feel alienated or on the outside. I don't allow any Christian cliches or any or Christian language. And the perfect example I use is we have this difficult time bringing people in. Like a lot of churches bring speakers from other places, from other churches. It's really almost impossible for us. And but my kids said, Dad, we got to connect more to other churches and bring them in. And so we brought in a really wonderful person to speak at Mosaic. She's like one of the most lovely people I know. So she's like the best of the best. And her opening statement when she walked on the platform at Mosaic on Sunday morning is, if you love Jesus, raise your hand. Mm-hmm. And we would never do something like that. We would never do something that immediately alienates the person who doesn't love Jesus, doesn't know Jesus. But she's just so used to being at a home game.
Right.
That she's always speaking to the insiders. And I can't help it, for better or worse, I'm always thinking about the outsider. Like I cringe the moment I hear something and I think, oh man, my friend who's like trusted me, and this is the one time in their life that may ever come, just experience this deep moment of alienation, or maybe even inauthenticity, because it's on such a superficial level that it doesn't really go deep into a person's soul. And so I think part of what has shaped Mosaic is, some of it is just honestly my own desire to create a space for people who aren't sure, and to create a really honest, authentic place where we don't accept cliches, we don't accept superficial answers, and we think at a deep level.
I think it's beautiful, and it makes me think of, I think there's so many people that grew up in a religious family tend to grow out of it because they felt it was forced on them. Mm-hmm. And I think in your messaging or what you're sharing now, I feel it's like that you are releasing the pressure, like you need to follow this. This is the word and everything, instead delivering it in a way that can be questioned, like bring out curiosity in somebody to explore it deeper, but by their own choice. So I think there's a really beautiful thing with that. And I really honor that how you have created this atmosphere to support everybody in their, however they, deepen their faith or build a relationship with God. So it's beautiful. One last question. I know we're getting on religion, but it's hard not to when I'm talking to a phenomenal pastor right here. But one thing I would love to know, as you built your relationship with God, how do you feel the Holy Spirit has directed you and guided you to do the work you needed to do? Like, how has that discovery been in your experience with God? Does that?
I don't really think of God in segmented expressions as like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I know that it's a very common language in our faith, and and people talk about the Holy Spirit's work or God's work or Jesus's work.
Right.
I really just think I only think of God just in terms of just the intimate relationship I have with the Creator, of the universe, and probably my principal image in my head is Jesus, because I tell people God is the word I use when I'm searching for Him, and Jesus is the word I use when I realize He's searching for me. And so it's like when you say God, it's like seeing the back of His head, and when He turns around, you see His face, you go, oh, that's Jesus. And but I don't think of spirituality as something that's segmented. I think spirituality is essentially human. So when I'm my most human self, that's when I'm my most spiritual self. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times we try to make spiritual things really like esoteric, and which honestly, it's why I think like things like weird things like speaking tongues are so prevalent everywhere, because or like people like doing weird things like I'm prophesying over you, or I'm laying my hands and people go falling over. I have a psychology degree, and I'm going, this is what you call hysteria. But I know we call it spirituality. And a part of the reason is because the most difficult thing to do is to change your character. It's so much easier to create something that feels spectacular. What's really hard is just to tell the truth, or to keep your promises, or to be faithful, or to not be greedy, but to actually be generous. To me, that's really where the rubber hits the road in spirituality. If you have all this spiritual hype, but you don't know how to keep your promises, I don't think you're a deeply spiritual person. And so I focus on the part of you that is essentially human. I don't really care what your spiritual gifts are. I do care whether you have inner peace, and whether you have found a place in your own soul where you understand your worth and your value, and you treat others with such respect and honor because you know your value, so you know their value. So to me, those are really the places where I focus my faith and my spirituality.
I love that. And that, honestly, as reading through your book, I feel that's the through line is how do you, is character in all of this. And so that is a great time to lead to your book. So I know one of the things you very much are all about living your fullest potential, like, being your best self, of course, showing up for others as your best. And how could I improve myself to become everything I was made to be? And one of the things you quoted in your book, which I love this statement, is that so many people avoid near-death experiences, but also avoid near-life experiences. And I love this. In the statement also, you say, the question isn't how close you are to death, but how close you are to life. What do you think is really getting in people's way of living their fullest potential?
Part of the reason I wrote Mind Shift is that I've always found it really easy to settle for a lesser life. And so I'm not really even just writing to someone else, I'm writing to me. I've been amazed how many times in my life I've made choices that have chosen a lesser path rather than a higher path for me. And what I've also realized is that most people are really happy when I choose the lower path. It just makes me easier to accept, easier to understand, and maybe even easier to love. Whenever I elevate and choose a more extraordinary path, a more courageous path, when I take on greater risk, greater adventure, when I expect more of myself, I actually have fewer people who enjoy me. And they may be inspired by me, but they don't necessarily want to be in that same crucible. And I've accepted that in my life. But why I write is I know that everyone's life is unique. And how I live my life is not the way you're supposed to live your life. So I'm not writing a book to have you live a life like I live. I'm writing a book so that I can decode what's going on in your own inner world that's keeping you from living the life you're created to live. And what I think the greatest gift you can give a person is to help them step into their own life. Because I think most of us are afraid to step into our own lives. And so we live a life of obligation. We live a life of expectation. We live a life of fear. And we get only to near life experiences, and I think it's a tragedy because life is so short. And I mean, I'm 65 now, and I can't
Looking
believe.
fabulous.
Thank you. But I can't believe that I'm at this stage of life. And frankly, I don't have any friends who are 65 because they're too old. They just don't have enough vibrancy and dynamic and fearlessness. But I also have a lot of people I know who are in their 20s and they don't have a lot of life in them and a lot of fearlessness and courage and boldness. And I just think it's a tragedy when you're living your life to be safe.
Right.
Because every day you live to be safe, you're losing that day from living the life you're created to live.
Absolutely. And I think anybody that's listening to this right now could really look at themselves and question that. Like, have I been playing it safe? Like, where have I stepped away from something because of something I fear? And I think that exactly, you say that I'm curious, how did you even, before writing this book and through your journey, who has been your biggest influence in changing or giving you mindset shifts, like shifting from that state? Because coming from where you've come through in your journey, and as you mentioned, some of the struggles you had, what was like the game-changing moment, the catalyst to shifting you into more courageous mindset and maybe going after starting Mosaic Church and risking so many things? What brought you there?
Well, I mean, obviously, my dedication in the book is to Jesus. And I actually think that's one of the reasons I love working in the business sector is that the mind shifts, the mental structures that have helped me in my life have actually come through my faith journey, through studying the scriptures and getting to know who Jesus is, understanding his way of thinking. But I don't want people to have to go through the tunnel of faith to benefit from the principles that I've learned. And I'll just give you, there's like a 2,000-year-old faith strategy. Get people at their worst when they're falling apart, when their lives are in total collapse, and then tell them they need God. And so that if you can catch people at their worst, they'll be open to Jesus. I have the exact opposite philosophy. I want to help you elevate so high and achieve so much and discover that you have such incredible potential and talent that you become aware that you're created in the image of God. And so I want to elevate your life to a level where you can't deny there's more going on than you. And so I'm not trying to catch you at the bottom. I'm actually trying to catch you at the top. And a part of why I wrote Mindshift is I actually do think that God cares about the vitality and beauty of your life in this world, and that it's really a treasure and it's a gift.
Amen to that. I know also one thing that is true that influences our mindset is our identity, like who we see ourselves to be. And that the way we see ourselves to be, that identity we create for ourselves, is really our limit we will have, like the standards we will have for ourselves is that identity we see for ourselves. And I know through your experience, you had this identity crisis and you really didn't know who you are. So you had to shape who you were going to be. And I think a lot of people are maybe in this place, but yet they want to be this, but they don't know how to close the gap. And so what would be the mindset shift that somebody needs to have to reshape or reframe their identity to become that version they see for themselves?
Yeah, it's funny when we talk about identity crisis, it feels like something happens on a Tuesday. I had an identity and then I had an identity crisis, and I actually think I've always been sort of like in identity creation.
Absolutely.
Because I think some people have a sense of who they are and then something happens and it crashes that identity. And now they're having to figure out, who am I? I had the opposite because I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. I've lived with an alias all my life. My name was never Erwin McManus. I never knew who I was. I never knew who my real father was. My stepdad was involved in creative underground economies, so that was a very unstable and very peculiar world. And so I never knew who I was. I came to the States. I spoke a different language. I was always trying to figure out who I needed to be, not who I was. Yeah. And I think a huge part of our struggle is that we really spend more of our energy trying to figure out who we needed to be for other people than who we are. And what was, I think, the significant shift for me was when I decided that I may never know who I am, but I can know who I'm becoming. And that it was more important for me to root my identity in who I was becoming than who I am. Because I didn't have the benefit of roots. And, we get our identity from a communal experience. And that's why when you're born in a culture, if you're born in Judaism, or if you're born Italian, and like you're born Greek, a lot of cultures, they're very familial and they keep the family together, and you have an identity. It's rooted in that family, and it may be even rooted in a belief system. And I didn't have that, so I was always trying to figure out, how do you know who you are? Right. And what I really try to help people realize is that with the deconstruction of all the community that we have, we don't have family in the way we did. We don't have tribes or community the way we used to. And so identity isn't formed in the same way. And so now you have to decide, who am I becoming? And root your identity in who you're becoming, not who you were or even who you are. Because other people will see you as you were. And, and if you only see yourself as you are, you're going to live in crisis, because who you are isn't who you want to become. And so you're never going to live up to your own expectations for yourself. And so you go, no, my identity is not who I was or who I am. My identity is who I'm becoming. And no one else has to see that. I know my intention. I know my motivation. I know my direction. And that's who I am.
So well said. And it's just changing that mindset and focusing on who you're becoming. And yes, that, like you said, very often people close to you only know you as one thing. So they will tend to reject that, your visions, and keep you small. And that moves it into this, one of my most favorite mind shifts. And this is so, so true. And I know everybody will reflect on this one, is you are your own ceiling. This is so powerful. That most of our limitations come from our internal mindset, and that is our ceiling. So if you could kind of talk about this mindset shift, and really how do we shift out of how do we blow the top off the ceiling without even having proof that is possible? Where we're trying to become, is that possible for us?
Yeah, ironically, I think it's chapter 5, You Are Your Own Ceiling, is maybe the shortest chapter in the book. But it may be the most important one in the book.
I think so.
Because this mental structure is so critical. And you can listen to your language. And I kind of want to use some contemporary examples, but I'm going to hesitate for a minute. But when you listen to interviews, let's say, and you're listening to a person, and it's always someone else's fault. It's always because of someone else or because of something else, and you have this odd view of, you're both the victim and the hero in your story, where everyone's to blame and you're the only one who's right. And when you have that framework, you actually begin to create a ceiling, because if everyone has to blame, then they're the only ones that can fix it. And so the moment you say it's your fault, you're saying you're the only one powerful enough to change it. The moment you take responsibility, you've actually reclaimed your power. And so a huge part of understanding that you're your own ceiling is to reclaim your power. Because I don't know if there's a more devastating emotion than feeling powerless. And when you feel powerless, it sucks all the energy and strength out of you. And when you convince yourself that you're powerless, you neutralize all of your talent, all your potential, and all the possibilities. So it's really important to recognize that your internal narrative, those internal limitations, are actually the only ceilings that can hold you back from becoming the person you're created to be. Now, you may have delusional expectations of your life. I'm going to be the next Tom Hardy, or, I'm going to be whatever, the next Tiger Woods, or whatever it may be. And you just don't have the talent to carry that vision. And I think sometimes that's the reality, is that people do not have an honest assessment of their own capacity. And what I don't mean by ceiling is that you can do anything. Anyone who says if you can dream it, you can do it, doesn't know how to dream. Because I can dream of all kinds of things I can't do. And what they're actually saying is, if you don't dream it, you'll never do it. But it goes beyond that. It takes more than the dream. It takes the discipline. And the moment you take on the disciplines, you remove the ceiling, not the moment you can dream past the ceiling. So it's not like, oh, I can see myself past this point. No, it's I take personal responsibility to climb the stairs to get past this limitation in my life.
Oh, that's so good. I love that you share this, because I think this is a great way, as you said, to if you want to say, like, remove the ceiling is the discipline. And I know one of your chapters is about talent is a hallucinogen. And you explain that sometimes talent could be a detriment to your potential, because, as we've kind of touched on a few things, it's like, when it comes to identity, like, so many people tie their identity to their talent. Let's say they're all-star athlete or whatnot, but you say that talent can be harmful. So if you could explain this, how this goes to, as you talked about, the discipline, why the discipline matters so much in achieving that thing.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's not that talent is harmful. It's that talent allows you to circumvent an important process of personal development. That when you have extraordinary talent at a young age, people will build external structures to access that talent and to extricate it from your life. It's not because they value you. It's like you're the oil hidden underneath the earth, and the structures are just the rig pulling all the oil out of you. And you think that people are for you, but they're for your talent. And then you think those structures are yours, but they're not. They're external structures. So what happens is that because there are so many external structures when you have hyper talent, you don't build the internal structures. So the moment those external structures are gone, you actually collapse, which is why about 75% of all professional football players within 5 years after their retirement are divorced, drug addicted, dead, or bankrupt. And I've worked with, interacted and worked with maybe 1,000 different pro football players over the last 20 years. And the reality is that they're the most talented kid from probably the age of 10 throughout their entire life. They're the biggest, they're the fastest, they're the strongest. And usually, because they're not all in this, all the pro players didn't play against each other in junior high. They were all spread across the country. They were the singular best talent. And they were so far above everyone else that it was easy. And then all of a sudden, you get to high school and you're still the most talented guy. You get to college, now you have a room full of players that are equally talented as you are. And now talent isn't the distinguishing factor. It's discipline, it's internal structures, it's resilience, it's mental structures, it's attitude. And all of a sudden, what differentiates begins to shift. It's not about talent. You get to the pros, everyone's a super talent. There isn't anyone at a pro level who isn't a super talent. Even the guy who's not starting is a super talent. And he doesn't understand how he's not the best player when he's always been the super talent. And so they collapse because they don't have internal structures for success. And it's not just true for sports. It's true for any arena where, probably the most superficial one, but if you hit the genetic jackpot and you happen to be beautiful or handsome and you're the homecoming queen, you're the best looking guy, you're whatever, you're Ryan Reynolds or, Blake, if you're Ryan or Blake, right? I can't even remember Blake's last name.
Lively.
Yeah. Right. So if you're Ryan or Blake, right, you hit the genetic lottery. You're just, incredibly attractive. And so if you're not careful, that attractiveness creates external structures for success, but it doesn't force you or compel you to build internal structures for success. And so for me, it's very exciting when you see someone who does have incredible talent or does have incredible attractiveness or does have incredible capacity, and they did the hard work of building that internal structure. And so they then create their own oil rig that pulls out their own talent, but they're not dependent on others to facilitate that talent in that sense.
Absolutely. And would you say, because you work with very successful elite entrepreneurs, people that make billions, millions, and whatnot, what would you say is the common problem you see amongst these people that come to you? Like, why are they coming to you? I mean, I could only assume why, but what would you say is a common thing they're looking for help with to be coached by you?
The ability to create wealth is a super talent, just like the ability to run a 4.240. It is a super talent, like being a prodigy at the violin. And so what it does is that it allows you to accelerate so fast in one area of success that you don't have to develop the other internal structures for success. And so then you end up with a person with $1 billion and they don't know how to have a good marriage.
Yeah.
They have $1 billion, but they don't know how to relate to their kids. They have $1 billion, but they have no friendships in their life. And, and so a huge part of it is, in a sense, they have enough money to pay for the time if they're willing to do the hard work of filling in the gaps. So the one advantage they do have is they have the luxury of success that gives them a little bit of a net. But if they don't do the hard work, I mean, I had this friend who, and by the way, he's like not a person of faith. He doesn't believe in God, and he's actually Jewish, but doesn't practice Judaism. Mm-hmm. And he came to me and said, "Hey, if you could do anything, could you help my friends keep their marriages together?" He said, I think he said 13 of his CEOs that he relates to, who companies were all like 100 million, 200 million, $500 million, $1 billion. 13 of them had divorced through the pandemic.
Wow.
And what I've found is that was more true than I imagined. And it's true for people who believe in Jesus and who don't believe in Jesus. There's no differential. I wish there was, but there's not. And it's because if you have the super talent of creating wealth, you think you can circumvent the process of developing the super talent of having character, or of developing kindness, or of developing humility, or actually of learning gratitude. And those other practices seem so small and so simple. I mean, I have $500 million. Why do I need to be grateful? I'm better than everyone. Why should I be humble? And and yet yesterday I was actually in a conversation. We have this mastermind online called The Arena.
Right.
And yesterday in The Arena, I do a live session usually once a week. I said something that I've never said before. And when I said it, it actually caught me off guard.
Really?
And I said that without character, you're incapable of holding joy. And it exploded in my head, and I realized this would solve so much for people. It's not just that character helps you be a good human being, or character helps you not be corrupt. When you lack character, you don't have the container for joy. And if you're always struggling with holding on to joy, one of the things you want to look at is there something in my character structure that I could work on that allow me to hold joy longer, or hope longer, or optimism longer. And so when I'm working with super successful people, it's the same thing usually. It's stepping back, looking honestly, and going, what internal structures do you need to work on that help you live a holistic life? Yeah. And because, with most of those people, I'm not going to tell them how to get rich. They're already 100 times richer than I am. Right. But I can help them learn how to have an internal world that's healthy and whole and can carry the weight of success.
Oh, and I love when you actually talk about this subject, that the weight of success weighs more than failure. And I find this very interesting, but so relevant and true. And we've witnessed this in people that have committed suicide when they're, billionaires and whatnot. And people are like, how did this happen? He seems so happy. And I think this explains so many different things, because they haven't built their internal structure to withstand that success that possibly happened so quickly they couldn't even keep up with it. Can you kind of dive a little deeper into this and how does somebody do the work, if you want to say, to develop their character? Like, where did they first begin besides buying your book and reading it?
Well, I think a part of the dynamic of why it's so intense when you're successful is, when you failed or when you're failing and you're sad, everyone can go, yeah, I understand why you're sad. When you're failing and you're depressed, your friends will go, yeah, I'd be depressed too. But when you're succeeding and you're sad, people go, what's wrong with you? You have everything going for you. When you're a huge success and you're depressed, people are like, why are you so ungrateful?
Right.
And so there are no relational structures that usually help you when you're successful, because no one can understand why you're not okay. And the truth is, you don't understand why you're not okay. Because when you're in the middle of failure and you're depressed, you understand why you're depressed. When you're failing and things are falling apart and you're just struggling with sadness and it's just seeping through you, you go, yeah, I'm sad because of this. But when everything's going well and you're making all kinds of money and your company is blowing up and you're famous and successful and then you're drowning in sadness. That's when you can't even make sense of it, and you feel that you must be so broken that nothing can fix you. And I think I understand this at a really deep level, and it gives me incredible empathy. And I don't know why, but I just keep thinking of Robin Williams, and I had a chance to have a few moments with Robin Williams and to have like this beautiful encounter with him in a men's room. And to watch and do stand-up comedy where we're walking out of the bathroom and captivating everyone in the hallway and then not too much, much longer later to end his life and to have experienced him that day on multiple occasions, bringing so much joy to rooms. And so I just never forget that people aren't doing as well as it may appear. And I think a starting point is you got to get around the right people. If you're around people who are just taking from you, and especially when you're successful, I mean, the hard thing once you've succeeded is you don't know who your friends are.
Yeah.
Everyone who comes into your life once you've succeeded is sort of suspect. And other people who are successful usually don't have time for new friendships. And they're just like you, and they're suspect too, And one of the things that really just like helped me understand a part of like the little bit of good I could do is I have a lot of friends who are just unbelievably successful because I'm actually a really good friend.
I can only imagine.
I just don't demand anything of you. And but I show up and I pay attention. And and I think some of it is, where you start is you just got to find some people, and it's backwards though. It's not about finding people who will be there for you. It's finding people that you will be there for. And if you're like super sad or super depressed or just feel like you don't have the support systems, you have to reverse engineer this. Like, I would be completely alone in my life if I didn't make a decision to be there for people. And I've lived the kind of life that it would be very easy to go, oh, it's kind of like lonely, in this space. But I have more friends at this stage of my life than any time in my life. And a huge part of that is because I've just decided to be there for people and with no expectations. And that is it just radically alters your universe. And it's one of the reasons, like, I'm not a church person. It's a weird thing, Erica. Like, you start asking me, I'm so uncomfortable with all the questions you're asking me about being a pastor and church. Like, I just would do anything not to have that conversation. I'm not a church person. And my wife, who knows me better than anyone, we've married 40 years, she's always worried about me going, are you going to tap out one day, And I started Mosaic because I know community is really important.
Yeah.
And there's no church in the world that I would fit into. There's nowhere on this planet that I would belong. And, and so I'm just really grateful for a place where I can be eccentric. I can be an outlier. I can be, unique and still be accepted and have a community. And I've wanted to create a place for people like that. And so I would just say, you need to find the right kind of people. You need to get around a community. You don't do life alone. And life was never meant to be done alone. And I think it has to start there.
Absolutely. And they say that's one of the big crises we have right now is the lack of community and connection. And I think that's exactly, and you start your book with that important statement that that how the people in your life and that people matter. There's so much goodness in all you shared today. And I know there's plenty of more I could dig out of you, but I want to honor your time. You did mention the arena. You mentioned that you have a mastermind that people could opt into. And I know, by the way, I was so sad. I wanted to come to your arena event that just passed in Los Angeles. I love the speakers you had. I could only imagine how phenomenal it was, but I happened to be out of town. So I'm sorry I missed that. But you also have a community and, like you said, a mastermind that people could join the arena. What is the main mission of the arena?
Well, we focused on a triangle: communication, leadership, character, and then the space in the middle of the triangle, it's big ideas. And I wanted to create a new approach toward adult education, because most of the entrepreneurs I know, most of the innovators, most of the creators did terrible in school or didn't pay attention. And it's because our educational system is built to train you to be an employee. It's not built to teach you how to start companies. It's not built to teach you how to be entrepreneurial. It's not built to teach you how to optimize your own talent and uniqueness. So I created the arena because it's really the future of learning. And it's where people can come and develop mastery in the critical areas that will hold you back or move you forward: communication, leadership, character, and big ideas. And then also, I coach people, but it's, I have even people I love ask me, would you coach me? But my one-on-one coaching, it's 6 figures. It's like, it's a whole different world. Yeah. And I have to respect the scale of that. And then we have a more private mastermind, but that's still pretty expensive. It's like $30,000 a year. And I know most people can't afford that. And so I wanted to create a space for people who were entrepreneurial, but not at that highly developed stage. And so I did it based on a membership strategy, like with TED. I was a part of TED for 20 years. I paid not only my membership to TED, but I was a donor for TED. I was a patron. And I really believed in a community where you elevated each other's thinking.
Absolutely.
But the dynamic difference for me with TED was that it was so thin sliced. It's very much about environmentalism. It became very political, and it wasn't at all about leadership development. And so you could go to TED for 20 years and never become a better leader. You go to TED for 20 years and never become a better communicator. But you would go to TED to become a more aware thinker. And that's why I loved it.
That's a great step. Yes.
Yeah. And so I wanted the arena to be a place where I elevate the way people think, and that we develop the next generation of world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, creators. And so it's a membership mastermind. You have to do it yearly. You go to erwinmcmanus.com if you want to know more.
Great. Sounds good. But the simplest way people could really elevate their mindset is grabbing your book, of course, Mindset or Mind Shift.
That's the easiest thing. You're catching me at my best. When you read a book, you're catching the writer at his best. and catching you at your most open, at your best. So it gives you the highest potential for learning and changing.
Absolutely. And also it's taking your best that you feel could serve others and putting it into a book. And like I said, I read this in about 2 hours. It was an easy read. And this is something I'm going to be passing on to the next person, most definitely. So there is such great wisdom. And I think one of the things, the key thing, as I said, the running through line with all your work, and especially of what I've read, is character development. Like, how can we create more discipline, more resilience, more courage to go after the things to live our fullest potential? And so I really appreciate all the wisdom you shared today. I know there is so much we could take away with. And one of the messages I want to share in this book, because I feel this is really awesome. You shared, there's so many people know of imposter syndrome, and it obviously inhibits them from going after the darn thing. And I heard this line and by somebody else, and then also in your book reiterate it, is that if you reframe it and think of it, you're a beginner. Like, everybody was once a beginner. That mindset shift to me could change everything, because I think so many people are held back by imposter syndrome. But if you think of it as you're just a beginner, you get to rise from here. That's empowering. And so all these mindset shifts, like how they could really transform our life, they're a game changer. So I really love that message.
That's awesome. I think 25 years ago when I wrote my first book, I really tried to help people understand that when you have the mindset of a novice, you are most inventive and creative. And for the last 30 years, whether it was in the world of fashion design or filmmaking or writing or whatever it may be, I've moved into all these different genres. And the reason is because I've understood that everyone starts the same way. The difference is some people think they know, and some people know they don't know. And the people who think they know hit ceilings so fast, but the people who know they don't know, they keep learning and learning and learning and growing. And I think 20 years ago, I wrote in a book that is more of a fable, that this mentor was saying to the apprentice said to the mentor, he's telling him it's time for you to go, and he said, "I'm not ready." And the apprentice said, "Have I learned everything I need to know?" And then the mentor says, "You know everything you need to learn." And I think that's the key, is that you will never learn everything you need to know, but you can know everything you need to learn.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, Erwin, can I ask you the question I ask all my guests, just in closure? If you were to leave a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned, and you just feel it's something you need to shout out to the world, what would that piece of wisdom be and why?
Well, you're asking someone who's written 12 books to pick one thing.
Yeah, I know, it's hard.
No.
Whatever comes to you that you just feel it's...
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is you're created for more. I just, and I don't know what that more is for you, but I know that you're created for more.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much, Erwin. This has been an absolute honor. As I said, I thank you for making the time. Thank you for writing your books and for all your wisdom you shared in all your sermons and on your talks and your masterminds, your humanitarian work, like all the impact you have made. I deeply, deeply honor and appreciate it. And I know everybody else does too. So thank you for this time.
Hey, thank you so much, Eric. It's good to be with you.